There are at least 3 ways to build most EDH decks. Fun! That's a bat. And mean. Let's look at the strong, fun, and mean way that I would build Edgar Markov. And the video starts right now. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I'm Joel. We're going to go over the 3 ways that I would build Edgar Markov, Vampire Daddy. Let's get into this commander. Edgar Markov, a black, a white, a red, and 3 other for a Vampire Knight 4/4. With a fantastic ability, Eminence. Whenever you cast another vampire spell, if Edgar Markov is in the command zone or on the battlefield, create a 1/1 black vampire creature token. He's got Burst Strike, he's got Haste. Whenever he attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. Edgar Markov is so strong. Eminence turned out to be an almost too powerful ability from these commander precons. Edgar just gets to sit in the background, chilling in the shadows. Every time you play a vampire, you get a vampire. That is so strong. You can't understand how strong it is unless you do, in which case you've got the immortal taste for blood and you're a true vampire lord. Then once he has built up an entire vampire army by giving you a vampire every time you play a vampire, you can cast Edgar Markov, immediately attack, start putting +1/+1 counters on each vampire you control, and probably win the game. You may be looking at this card and going, Joel, how do we build this 3 different ways? This is just Vampire Tribal. You should build this Vampire Tribal, and I tend to agree with you. So for Edgar's strong way, we are going to look at Vampire Tribal. However, you know all the good vampire cards, so we're just going to go over good vampires that have been printed in the last year. Some vampires you might have missed to put into your Vampire Tribal deck. For the mean way, you'll notice I skipped fun. For the mean way, we're going to go with aristocrats because turns out that a lot of the good aristocrats cards are already vampires. And then for the fun way, right in the middle, we're going with white hair gang, baby. White hair gang. I'll see you out on the dance floor for that one. Let's take a look at the strong way. So I want to take a look at some good vampires that have been printed in the last year that should probably be in this deck. And we're going to start with Embersturm Predator, a red, a black, and 2 other for a 3/3 flyer. When it becomes tapped, you exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard, so strong, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. And you have the ability to sacrifice another creature to give it indestructible until end of turn, and it does have to tap if you do that. Not only is this a flying threat that can gain indestructible and is relevant to our creature types, but you have the ability to exile cards on an attack trigger, and it's basically an infinite sack outlet. Through your aristocrat strategy, that can be very strong. And with Edgar, you're creating a 1/1 vampire when you cast this, so you're automatically creating the creature that will save Predator and keep it growing and gaining indestructible. Love this one. You should definitely put it in. That one's from Kaldheim. From the Silver Quill Commander decks, we got Felisa Fang of Silver Quill. Vampire Wizard with Flying and Mentor. Whenever it attacks, you put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature with lesser power. So all of the tokens you create, maybe? Whenever a non-token creature you control dies, if it had counters on it, you create X, tap 2/1 white and black Inkling creature tokens with Flying, where X is the number of counters on it. So it's just some redundancy on creatures when your creatures that are non-tokens die. I think Felisa deserves maybe a little turn, maybe a little nod in your deck. See if you like it, how it plays in there. But that relevant vampire creature type, we love it. Vampire Socialites, a red and a black for a 2/2 vampire noble with menace. When it ETBs, if an opponent lost life this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on each other vampire you control. Wow! Play this in your second main phase after you've gotten some damage through, and all of your vampires get a permanent +1/+1 anthem when the Socialite enters the battlefield. Then, as long as an opponent lost life this turn, each other vampire you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So in the future, you play all your vampires in the second main phase when they've done damage to an opponent, when you've gotten some damage across to your opponents in the first main phase on your combat step, and then Vampire Socialites dumping counters onto them as they come into play. I like the nice little wombo combo with Vampire Socialite and Felisa, because Felisa's looking for creatures with counters on them. When they die, you create X 2/1 white and black Inkling creature tokens when those non-token creatures die, if it had counters on it. Vampire Socialite's a nice little combo piece, came out in this most recent set, depending on when you're watching this. Bold Plagiarist is a black and 3 other for a 2/2 with flash, and it says whenever an opponent puts 1 or more counters on a creature they control, they put the same number of and kind of counters on Bold Plagiarist. This can be a nice little trick. I liked that it had the vampire creature type, because having a flashing vampire, you're also creating a 1/1 vampire when you play this with Edgar in the command zone or on the battlefield. And so Bold Plagiarist is going to bring in a 1/1 at instant speed. I like that just kind of in and of itself as a little trick, as a little, hello, you're making me sack something? Okay, play Bold Plagiarist, I'll sack the 1/1 that it created. I'll sack Bold Plagiarist if I've got to sack a non-token. Plus, a little bit of timing, and you've got some counters on Bold Plagiarist that got put on one of your opponent's creatures as well. Really like that one. Also really like Florian, a new legendary vampire from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. A red and black and 1 other for a 3/3 with first strike. And at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, so main phase 2, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total amount of life your opponent's lost this turn. You exile one of those cards and put the rest on the bottom of your library. You can play the exiled card this turn. So a little bit of that impulse draw that red has been giving us more and more over the last few years, attached to a creature that when you play it creates a 1/1. Like, that just can't be understated. Just playing good vampires in this deck is going to already be a really good strategy. If we could just get some really, synergistic and powerful vampires on top of that, we're winning. Marshland Bloodcaster's a 5-mana 3/5 with flying. You pay 2 and tap it, and it says rather than pay the mana cost of the next spell you cast this turn, you may pay life equal to that spell's mana value. This is insane. If you can untap with Marshland Bloodcaster, you can cast like a 9, a 10 cost spell just for paying life. You don't even need any mana. You just need 2. Pay 2, tap Marshland Bloodcaster, and that thing is suddenly Phyrexian mana'd up, so it can just be played. And life total in EDH, come on. Easy resource to burn through. We can just use that to cast our creatures. Big fan of Marshland Bloodcaster. Came out in some of the Commander precons this year. Callous Bloodmage was in the main set of Strixhaven, and it offers a little versatility. This one is a little lower in power level, but it's still got some value just because it's a vampire that provides versatility. That bottom one of the modals, exile target player's graveyard, that would be why I play this. Past that, if you don't have a graveyard target to hit, draw a card, lose a life. Okay. And if you really need some tokens, create a 1/1 green and black pest creature token. That's probably the one I would be playing the least, but with Callous Bloodmage, you're playing it as a vampire. Edgar Markov gives you a 1/1 vampire, also a 1/1 pest. That's 3 bodies for 3 mana, 4 total power. Not too bad, but I really like the draw a card, and I really love the exile target player's graveyard. That is the one that I would probably most often be picking. Bloodthirsty Adversary is a 2-mana 2/2 vampire with haste. This is from the Adversary cycle from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. When it ETBs, you can pay 3 mana, 1 red, 2 other, any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, you put that many +1/+1 counters on Bloodthirsty Adversary, then exile up to that many target instants and sorceries with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard and copy them. You can cast those copies without paying their mana costs. Any of your 2-mana removal spells, 3-mana removal spells, destruction spells, recast those. Play this early as a 2/2 with haste. Create a 1/1 with Edgar Markov. Really go the burn 'em down route. Play it late. You're playing it for 5. It's a 2/2 with haste, 3/3 with haste. Now with the +1/+1 counter, and you can recast your, Doomblade from your graveyard if you want to. I love this, being able to get your removal spells back from the graveyard, relevant creature type. Really a big fan of this mythic. Hey everybody, if you're enjoying the video, consider hitting that subscribe button down there. It really helps out the channel. And if you do like our stuff, you're already subscribed to us, go check out our Patreon. It really helps us on our path to make this our full-time job. Thanks. Time to turn up the music. We're going to the White Hair Gang dance party. You really want to be playing vampires with this deck, but if you're not going vampire tribal and you want to take Edgar Markov in a real weird way and get some looks from your pod, get some side glances. What is he playing? Edgar Markov White Hair Gang? Edgar Markov hashtag White Hair Gang? We're going to start with Avacyn Angel of Hope. I still tried to find some relevant good cards, as long as they had white hair, but I did try and find some good ones. Avacyn Angel of Hope. Fantastic 8-mana beater. Flying, Vigi, indestructible. Other permanents you control have indestructible. Boom. Not a relevant creature type, but whatever. White Hair Gang, baby. Hashtag White Hair Gang. Thalia, Heretic Cathar. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Boom. White Hair Gang. Hashtag White Hair Gang. I like having a little slowdown on our opponent's side, especially since we've got kind of an aggressive strategy going. Felden of the Third Path. Look in there. Look in there. You may be saying, Joel, this is hashtag Gray Hair Gang. I see some white hairs. Felden is hashtag White Hair Gang. 3 mana, create a token of a copy of a target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact. Gains haste, and you sacrifice it. Recur any of your vampires that have died. Hashtag White Hair Gang. Let's go with Audric, Master Tactician. When it and at least 3 other creatures attack. Not hard to do in this deck. You choose which creatures block this combat and how those creatures block. Boom. Love it. Set up the blocks in your favor. That is what you may want to do. You may also want to be like, nah, don't block. I just want to attack. Don't block me. Audric, Master Tactician. White Hair Gang. Hashtag Black Stripe in the White Hair Gang. Love Audric in an attacking deck. Ardenn. You got some vampires? Look at Edgar Markov. They are suiting him up for battle over there in the art. Ardenn can be like, hey, you want to put some R's and equipment in your deck? Hashtag White Hair Gang. That's where that one goes. And hey, look, if you're playing equipment, let's go hashtag White Hair Gang with a Kiri Fearless Voyager. Whenever you attack a player with 1 or more equipped creatures, draw a card, baby. Plus, it's got this activated ability to unattach an equipment from a creature you control. If you do, tap it and it gains indestructible. Love it. Put an equipment on Edgar. They go to wipe the board. Pay 1. Unattach the equipment. Tap Edgar. It gains indestructible. Or whatever you've got suited up. Hashtag White Hair Gang. Hashtag White Fur Gang. Ragavan. Making treasure tokens. Little impulse draw. Exile the top card of that player's library when it deals combat damage. Until in a turn you can cast it. Pretty good. Hashtag White Hair Gang. And then Elesh Norn. Look at that. Tell me that's not white hair. It's kind of shell. It's kind of like a shell. It's probably made of some sort of living metal. Probably feels leathery. But if you ting ting ting, that's probably what it sounds like. But tell me that's not hashtag White Hair Gang. Elesh Norn would be pissed if you didn't invite the Grand Cinnabite to the hashtag White Hair Gang dance party. On a real note, other creatures you control get +2/+2. Real good in a deck where you're just making 1/1s just by casting cards. And creatures your opponents control get -2/2. Dope. Hashtag White Hair Gang. And for the main strategy, we are going to go with Aristocrats. If you're not familiar, Aristocrats is a strategy where you want your stuff to die because it's going to give you value. A la Cruel Celebrant, whenever it or another creature or a planeswalker you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. We're going to be draining our opponents slowly, 1 life at a time, by having our creatures die. I love that cards like Cruel Celebrant say or another creature, because that means we can be sacrificing our 1/1 tokens that Edgar Markov is creating and get a ton of Aristocrats value. A ton of Aristocrats value. Really love this strategy. I think Cruel Celebrant is an excellent card in this deck, and it's a vampire, as is Blood Artist. 2 mana for a 0/1. When it or another creature dies, target player loses a life, you gain a life. This is great. It's not another non-token creature. It's it or another creature straight up. When you play this, you're creating a 1/1. You're going to have a lot of stuff ready to die, ready to drain our opponents and get our little Aristocrat strategy built. I thought I was going to have a tough time coming up with multiple strategies to build what is very obviously a vampire tribal deck. But looking at these creature types, Vindictive Vampire, creature type Vampire. When it or another creature you control dies, it deals a damage to each opponent and you gain a life. Boom. That's exactly what we want. And all these creature types are relevant. This is what we want to be playing anyway. Let's lean hard into an Aristocrat strategy. Falkenrath Noble. It's a vampire. When it or another creature dies, target player loses a life and you gain a life. Boom. I love this. You don't even have to be controlling the creature for Falkenrath Noble to create the little drain effect. Anything dies. That's fantastic. Cliffhaven Vampire is another one. Whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life, so it comes from the other direction. You combine this with something like Exquisite Blood, and you've got an infinite loop that's just going to drain all your opponents and you win. Sanguine Bond is the other version of this. Sanguine Bond, Exquisite Blood is a really common 2-card win the game combo. If you can deal damage, it says whenever an opponent loses a life, you gain that much life, and the other Sanguine Bond says whenever you gain a life, opponent loses life. So it just creates this infinite loop so that you can drain all your opponents down and you win right there. So you want to make sure that in your strategy, in your aristocrats deck, you've got some stuff like that. Like Vanewitch Covenant kind of comes at this from a different angle. Whenever you gain life, you can pay a black mana, and if you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. It's recursion built into an aristocrat strategy taped onto a vampire card that's going to trigger Edgar Markov with Eminence when you cast it. Love this one. That one came out this year. Vermin Gorger's another interesting one. It's a one-off. It's not going to happen every time, but you play it, it creates a 1/1 vampire. You tap Vermin Gorger, sack a creature, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. That's each opponent, straight up. I love that it says each opponent on here, and also that Vermin Gorger combined with Edgar Markov is going to create its own feast, if you will. And we're going to be able to use this little common to our advantage just because it's got creature type vampire. Butcher Malakir represents the last kinds of cards that you want to make sure your aristocrats deck have. You're going to be sacrificing a lot of cards. You're going to be sacrificing a lot of creatures, if you will. Butcher Malakir or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So we're going to be sacrificing our stuff for value, and then cards like Butcher of Malakir are going to force our opponents to sacrifice creatures against their will. Cards like Grave Pact. Whenever a creature you control dies, each other player sacrifices a creature. We're going to be eating our own creatures a lot in this deck. So run Butcher of Malakir, run Grave Pact, run Dictate of Erebos. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So you get these little 1/1 vampires onto the battlefield. You sack them when you've got things like Cruel Celebrant and Blood Artist on the battlefield. Each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacks a creature. Boom. You're in the money. Aristocrats is a fantastic way to take this deck, if not a little mean and pretty competitive. That's the strong, fun, and mean ways that I would build Edgar Markov. Let me know down in the comments how you're building it, especially if it's not a vampire tribal. I want to hear some other creative stuff that other people have come up with as a way to build Edgar that's not just, yes, vampires. Obviously, we're going to be using vampires in the deck, but if we got some other strategies that we can work around. If you liked the video, hit that like button. If you didn't, hit that dislike button. If you want to support the channel on a deeper level, go check out our Patreon. Link is down in the description below. Other than that, hashtag White Hair Gang for life.